If you read Japanese history books and watch the movies and TV dramas, you'll no doubt be aware of a number of names and places that crop up regularly. Where did these samurai come from? How and why did they become so powerful? And where and why did they fight their epic battles? I'm Chris Glenn. Welcome to a presentation on the samurai and samurai culture of central Japan, and in particular, the home of the samurai, Aichi Prefecture. Without a doubt, the central Japan region, especially modern-day Aichi and Gifu prefectures, are among the historically most important regions of Japan, certainly the areas that led to the founding of modern Japan. In fact, many of the more important battles of the Sengoku, or Warring States period, were fought around this area. The reasons for this region having had more than its fair share of battles is both political and geographical. What is now Aichi Prefecture was originally two provinces, Owari and Mikawa provinces, held by the Oda and the Matsudaira, later known as the Tokugawa clans. 85% of Japan's landmass is mountainous. Flat areas were highly prized, as they could be utilized for the growing of rice. Rice was a cash-like commodity. It was money. Samurai were often paid in rice. Aichi Prefecture consists of the Nobi Plain, a wide, flat area, perfect for growing rice. It's well irrigated by the three great rivers, the Kiso, the Shonai, and Yahagi rivers, which were also important for trade and commerce, as they could also be used for the transportation of goods and produce. And timber. The area's north and far eastern regions are mountainous, important for good, strong timber, for minerals such as clay, gold and iron, and as a source for food. To the south of Aichi is the Pacific Ocean, another important food source, also important for salt production, another cash commodity, and another vitally important transport route. Talking of routes, being in the center of Japan, it was also where a number of the more important highways ran, such as the Tokaido and the Nakasendo in northern Owari. So you can understand that Owari, Mikawa, and Mino, the central Aichi and of course Gifu prefectures, were strategically very important. Whoever had control of these regions had control over Japan. For that reason, many surrounding warlords wanted to take these vitally important, prosperous, and lucrative areas for themselves. So, who were the samurai of these lands? Well, let's start with the three most influential, most important samurai of the Sengoku, or Warring States period. The three men, known collectively as the three unifiers of Japan, all of whom were born in what is now Aichi Prefecture. The first of the three unifiers of Japan, Oda Nobunaga, was born in 1534. Nobunaga was born the son of a minor warlord, Oda Nobuhide. Now, according to legend, the young Nobunaga was ill-mannered, he was untidy, willful, and he failed to take his position seriously. In 1551, Nobunaga's father died following a short illness, leaving the 15-year-old as the head of the Oda clan and its rich, fertile domain. Dressed inappropriately for the funeral, he stormed into the temple and threw incense at the altar in full view of his family and retainers. They were shocked, and rightly so. Nobunaga's eccentric actions were becoming more of a concern to the loyal Oda samurai, and it was nicknamed the Fool of Owari. Now, it appears that Nobunaga played the fool to trick his potential adversaries, to hide his powerful military might and his true intentions. Nobunaga established himself as both cunning and merciless. He seized full control of his father's lands by slaying his uncle and later his brother, both at Kiyomasu Castle. With an army of just around 2,500 men, he defeated an invading force of 25,000 samurai led by Imagawa Yoshimoto at the Battle of Ikihazama. That was in 1560. Nobunaga went on to attack and claim Gifu Castle, enlarging it and making it his primary headquarters. Then, through political marriages, he secured affiliations with surrounding warlords and potential rivals before taking the province of Omi, present-day Shiga Prefecture. As his land holdings and his influence rose, he then turned his hand to putting an end to 2.5 centuries of rule by the now corrupt Ashikaga shogunate. He disposed of the 15th Ashikaga shogun, Yoshiaki, and shortly after, at the Battle of Nagashino in 1575, Nobunaga and his ally, Tokugawa Ieyasu, oversaw the defeat of the powerful rival Takeda clan. Now, to achieve all of this, Nobunaga had surrounded himself with many gifted military men, his top three generals being Aichi Mitsuhide, Shibatakatsure, and Toyotomi Hideyoshi. In 1582, Nobunaga's men were scattered across the lands, expanding his ever-growing domain. Toyotomi Hideyoshi was involved in a long siege against the powerful Mori clan in central western Japan at the time. Aichi Mitsuhide was ordered to bring reinforcements to assist Hideyoshi, but instead, Aichi inexplicably renegade, and on June 22, 1582, marched his 30,000 men to Kyoto, where Nobunaga was lodged with just some 70 guards in the temple of Honnoji. He attacked his liege lord. Hopelessly outnumbered, wounded by arrow fire, Nobunaga retreated to the inner sanctum of the temple in anger and despair, and setting it alight, committed seppuku, ritual suicide. He was 48 years old, and he conquered a third of the nation. His assassin would be killed less than 3 weeks later, and it would be another of Nobunaga's most able generals, Toyotomi Hideyoshi, who would go on to complete his work in unifying the nation. The second of the great unifiers of Japan, Toyotomi Hideyoshi, began life as an ashigaru, a low-ranked foot soldier who rose in the ranks to become a samurai, a general, a statesman, and eventually ruler of all Japan. Hideyoshi was born in Nakamura, just west of Nagoya Station, around 1537. He was said to have entered the services of Oda Nobunaga as a sandal bearer. Now, the well-known story goes that one cold winter's morning, Hideyoshi put his master's straw sandals inside his kimono to keep them warm. Nobunaga, apparently impressed by his attitude, rewarded him well and, noting his intellect, promoted him as he rapidly distinguished himself. In 1582, Hideyoshi was in the southwestern regions of Japan, laying siege to the Mori clan when he received word of Nobunaga's death at the hands of the trusted general Aichi Mitsuhide. Hideyoshi quickly ended the siege, turned his men on the traitor Mitsuhide. He then returned to Nobunaga's Kiyomasu Castle, where he met with the senior retainers of the Oda clan, and successfully nominated Nobunaga's infant grandson, Sanboshi, as heir, assigning Nobunaga's second and third sons, Nobukatsu and Nobutaka, as the guardians of the child until his coming of age. Hideyoshi then governed in the name of the young Sanboshi, basically usurping Oda power for himself. He was challenged by Nobutaka, who called on the long-trusted vassal Shibatakatsure to oust Hideyoshi. Hideyoshi in turn sent Nobutaka's brother, Nobukatsu, against his sibling for the siege of Gifu Castle. Hideyoshi then attacked and defeated Shibatakatsure at the Battle of Shizukatake. Oda power was now all his. The following year, 1584, the Tokugawa and the Toyotomi armies faced off at Mount Komaki, north of Nagoya, and a battle was fought around Nagakute to the east. Through negotiation, Hideyoshi was able to sue for peace, after which he returned to Osaka to begin building the magnificent Osaka Castle. Hideyoshi had conquered the southern islands of Shikoku and Kyushu, and he brought the daimyo of the northern districts under his control. He surveyed the land, he standardized the currency, and to cease uprisings and war, he confiscated swords from the peasantry. With the nation at peace, and many hundreds of thousands of samurai warriors now idle, Hideyoshi set his sights on conquering Ming dynastic China and launched two major campaigns against the Korean peninsula. During the second of these invasions, Hideyoshi died at the age of 63, leaving his vast empire to his 5-year-old son and heir, Hideyori. Now, Hideyoshi was determined that the Toyotomi family should retain power, and so he appointed a board of 5 regents, the Gotairo, to rule in his son's stead. It was the actions of one of those regents, Tokugawa Ieyasu, who would again bring the nation to civil war and then emerge victorious. Tokugawa Ieyasu was born to the Matsudaira clan in Okazaki Castle. The Matsudaira of Mikawa were hemmed in by the Order to the west and the Imagawa clan to the northeast. Choosing which of the rival warlords to ally themselves with caused much contention amongst the Matsudaira vassals. Finally, Hidetada decided to support the larger, stronger Imagawa clan. At the age of just 6, Ieyasu was sent as a hostage to the Imagawa clan by his father, who sought their help in the fight against the Order. En route to the Imagawa base, castle of Tsuruga, the convoy was redirected by a maverick retainer of the Matsudaira clan to the enemy, Oda Nobuhide, who then offered peace terms to the Matsudaira on such difficult conditions that Hidetada refused, even at the risk of his young son's life. Ieyasu was then confined to Nagoya Castle for around about 3 years. When the Imagawa later attacked Anjo Castle, also in Aichi Prefecture, and captured another of Oda Nobuhide's sons, Ieyasu was then handed over to the Imagawa in exchange. As a hostage of the Imagawa, and we have to realize here that the hostages were very well cared for. They were basically treated like family members in order to strengthen relations between the two clans. So, as a hostage or ally of the Imagawa, Ieyasu took part in the 1560 Battle of Ikihazama, when, as mentioned, around 25,000 Imagawa soldiers were trounced by just 2,500 Oda samurai. With the death of Imagawa Yoshimoto, Ieyasu was at last free. After returning to Okazaki Castle, he allied himself with the man who had indirectly brought about his freedom, Oda Nobunaga. Ieyasu faced near total defeat in 1573 when the great general Takeda Shingen attacked the Tokugawa's northern provinces in the Battle of Mikatagahara. 4 years later, and with the assistance of Oda Nobunaga, he would get his revenge, decimating the Takeda forces at the Battle of Nagashino. And following the death of Nobunaga, Ieyasu would face off against Hideyoshi at the Battle of Kamaki Nagagate, although relations between the powerful men would later improve greatly. In fact, on Hideyoshi's deathbed, Ieyasu was called in and entrusted to lead the Council of Regents, who would attend to Hideyoshi's 5-year-old son and designated heir, Toyotomi Hideyoshi. Ieyasu readily agreed, of course, and upon the death of Hideyoshi, immediately began to make moves to assume complete power of the country. His actions invoked the ire of a number of his contemporaries, many of whom openly condemned his plans, tearing the nation into 2 factions, East and West. Now, these 2 great armies met on October 21, 1600 at Sekigahara, the gateway between the mountains dividing the country. Ieyasu would emerge victorious from what was to become the biggest, bloodiest, most decisive field battle in samurai history. Less than 3 years later, after the Battle of Sekigahara, Ieyasu was invested with the title of shogun, establishing a dynasty that would rule Japan for 260 years until 1868. Ieyasu himself died in 1616, aged 73, a ripe old age in a time when the average lifespan was only around 50 years. Now, besides the 3 unifiers, some of the other famous samurai from Aichi include Fukushima Masanoori. He first saw action as a 17-year-old at the siege of Miki Castle under Toyotomi Hideyoshi. He was at the Battle of Yamazaki and would distinguish himself in the Battle of Shizukatake, taking the first head-in battle, for which he was recognized as one of the 7 spears of Shizukatake. Fukushima Masanoori would continue to prove his worth in many battles, including the ill-fated Korean campaigns, and later became master of Kiyomasu Castle in Aichi Prefecture. Following the death of Hideyoshi, Fukushima Masanoori turned his allegiances to the Tokugawa clan. Just before Sekigahara, Masanori and Ikeda Teramasa launched an attack on Gifu Castle from Kiyomasu, and for his fine services at the Battle of Sekigahara, Masanori was made daimyo of Hiroshima Castle. In 1610, Fukushima Masanoori was tasked with constructing Nagoya's Horikawa, or Moat River, a 16.2 kilometre canal linking Nagoya Castle with the port area in the south. The river still remains as one of the city's main attractions. Another was Kato Kiyomasa. He was known as a samurai among samurai. Born in modern-day Nakamura ward of Nagoya City, he entered the services of his cousin Toyotomi Hideyoshi at the age of just 15, seeing action in the Battle of Yamazaki against Aichi Prefecture. At the Battle of Shizugatake against Shibatakatsure, he was named one of the 7 spears of Shizugatake. Kiyomasa is also remembered for having spear-hunted tigers during his time in Korea, bringing back the pelts to Hideyoshi as souvenirs. In fact, tiger hunting was later banned by Hideyoshi during the Korean campaign. The reason being was that too many samurai were getting killed by tigers trying to copy Kiyomasa and bring one down. During the Battle of Sekigahara, Kiyomasa surprisingly sided with the Tokugawa forces. Although he wasn't present at the actual battle site, he fought against the Tokugawa enemies in Kyushu. Kiyomasa's castle building skills were exceptional. He designed a number of strategic castles and was later engaged by Tokugawa Ieyasu to build the stone ramparts supporting Nagoya Castle's magnificent keep. While he was working on construction of Nagoya Castle, Kiyomasa used surplus building materials to erect the Myogyoji Temple on the site of his birth. Another hero, Honda Takatsu, was born in Okazaki. He was one of the top 4 generals serving Tokugawa Ieyasu. As a close retainer of Ieyasu and a brilliant tactician, he was at Ieyasu's side at the Battle of Ikihazama, Anegawa, Mikatagahara, Nagashima, Kamaki, Nagagate, and of course Sekigahara, amongst many, many others. Honda Takatsu was called a samurai among samurai by Oda Nobunaga. Toyotomi Hideyoshi once commented that among samurai there was Honda Takatsu in the east and Tachibana Murashige in the west. Takeda Shingen also praised Honda in saying that the only things above Tokugawa Ieyasu are his helmet and Honda Takatsu. Takatsu is often referred to as the warrior who surpassed death itself, as he apparently never once suffered a significant wound despite having fought in over 55 battles. The story goes that he died in Edo in 1610, having taken up the hobby of wood carving. He accidentally cut his own hand and, watching the blood flow from the wound for the very first time, decided that his life was at an end. And he willed himself to death, aged about 63, some weeks later. Ikeda Teramasa's family long served the Oda clan. Not only had Teramasa's grandfather served Oda Nobunaga's father, but his grandmother had served as Nobunaga's wet nurse. After Nobunaga's death, the Ikeda clan served Toyotomi Hideyoshi. Teramasa fought at the Battle of Kamaki Nagagate in 1584, in which his father and his elder brother were killed in action. Teramasa was awarded Yoshida Castle in Toyohashi, also Aichi Prefecture, and 4 years later, by order of Hideyoshi, married Tokugawa Ieyasu's daughter in an attempt to strengthen political ties. After Hideyoshi died, Ikeda Teramasa turned his loyalties to his father-in-law, Tokugawa Ieyasu. After Sekigahara, he was awarded the strategically important Himeji Castle, at the time in the middle of former Emetri territory, which was greatly expanded under his control in the show of Tokugawa authority. By the time of his death in 1613, his power and influence was such that Ikeda Teramasa was nicknamed Saigoku no Shogun, or the Shogun of the West. Shibatakatsure was born in modern-day Meitoku of Nagoya City. He originally served under Oda Nobunaga's younger brother, Oda Nobukatsu, and he was part of Nobukatsu's plan to overthrow his brother. Katsue led the charge against Nobunaga, but was defeated in the Battle of Ino. Nobunaga had his younger brother executed, but he spared Katsue, and so Katsue became a very brave and loyal commander under Nobunaga. He even married Nobunaga's sister. After distinguishing himself with a number of masterful victories, Shibatakatsure was sent to what is now Fukui, where he built Kitanosho Castle with a 9-story keep. It was the biggest in Japan at the time. After Nobunaga's death, Shibatakatsure and Toyotomi Hideyoshi had a major falling out over clan leadership, leading to the Battle of Shizugatake. And as his allies fell to Hideyoshi's armies, Katsue was forced to retreat back to his castle at Kitanosho. Defeated and surrounded by Hideyoshi's forces, he ordered his daughters and wife, Oichi, Nobunaga's sister, to leave the castle and seek the protection of Hideyoshi. Oichi refused, and so husband and wife set their castle alight and, committing seppuku, killed themselves in the flames. Another hero, Kato Yoshiaki, one of Hideyoshi's most able and trusted generals, was born in Hazuku, Mikawa Province, Aichi Prefecture. Named as one of the 7 spears of Shizugatake, he also saw action in Korea, leading Hideyoshi's naval forces. Kato Yoshiaki would later serve Tokugawa Ieyasu, playing a major role in the Battle of Sekigahara. He served as lords of Iyo Matsuyama in Shikoku, building the magnificent castle there, and later in Aizu. Maeda Toshiye was one of the most important, influential, and successful figures of the Warring States period. He was born in Ariko Castle, in what is now part of Nagoya. Distinguishing himself in fighting, he was rewarded with land in Kaga, in Kanazawa, worth 1 million koku, the wealthiest domain of the Edo period. Following Nobunaga's death, Toshiye would see battle against his friend Hideyoshi in the Battle of Shizugatake, in which he fought under Shibata colors. With the defeat of Shibatakatsure, Toshiye then became a general in Hideyoshi's army. Named as one of the Council of 5 Elders, a team assembled by Hideyoshi to rule in place of his young son, Toshiye was among those at Hideyoshi's deathbed in 1598, and he was ordered to take direct care of the child, Hideyori. Maeda Toshiye took a strong stance against Ieyasu's actions following Hideyoshi's passing, but he himself died a year before the Battle of Sekigahara. Now, had he lived another year, his influence on the other daimyo may have been such that Tokugawa Ieyasu would have found it difficult to raise sufficient support for his cause. One of Nobunaga's most trusted senior vassals, Niwa Nakahide, was born in modern-day Nagoya City's Nishiku. He was married to Nobunaga's daughter and participated in most of the major battles of his time. He was made master of Wakasa Province, now southern Fukui Prefecture, and Uyama Castle in Omi, Shiga Prefecture. When Nobunaga was felled by Akechi Mitsuhide in the Honnoji incident, Nakahide quickly joined Toyotomi Hideyoshi in avenging that fallen master. He later fought against Shibatakatsure at Shizugatake and was awarded modern-day Fukui and Ishikawa prefectures. Unfortunately, Niwa Nakahide died not long after, in May of 1585. Now, according to some records, he died of illness. Other reports claim he committed seppuku from guilt that he had unwittingly been a major part of Hideyoshi's usurping of Oda clan power. Otakuichi was another of Nobunaga's closest vassals and his archery instructor. Born in Ajiki village of Kasugai, Otakuichi was raised in the Jokanji temple. However, what Otakuichi is best remembered for are the books he wrote, one of the most famous being the Shincho Koki, the Chronicles of Lord Nobunaga, a diary of sorts of Nobunaga's actions and achievements. In the Shincho Koki, Ota often writes from first-hand experience, being on the battlefield or at council of war meetings with his lord. Following Nobunaga's death, he pioneered investigative journalism in Japan by interviewing people associated with the incidents to discover the details in order to record them as faithfully as possible. Ota's writings have made a significant contribution to modern understanding of the Sengoku period and one of 16th century Japan's most important figures, Oda Nobunaga. The Shincho Koki made him famous, but he also wrote a book on Hideyoshi titled the military records of the imperial regent, as well as a history of Ieyasu's Battle of Sekigahara. Otakuichi doesn't just appear in the history books, he wrote them. Yamuchi Kazatoyo participated in most of the major battles of the late 16th century, including Anagawa and Nagashino under Oda Nobunaga, and at Sekigahara under Ieyasu. His wife Chiyo is said to have been the brains behind his success. She once bought him the finest of horses. It was the horse that stood out, bringing Kazatoyo to the attention of his master Nobunaga. He later served Toyotomi Hideyoshi and was given a small domain in Nagahama and was later elevated to daimyo, feudal lord status, at Kakigawa Castle in Shizuoka Prefecture. After the Battle of Sekigahara for his services, he received Tosa province in Shikoku, where he built the magnificent Kochi Castle. Minamoto no Yoritomo, one of the greatest heroes of Japan, the finest of all samurai warriors, and the first great Kamakura shogun. He too was born not in Kamakura, nor in Kyoto, but in Nagoya, at Atsuta, on the site where the Seiganji Temple stands today. Hattori Hanzo is probably better remembered as one of the mightiest ninja of all. Hanzo was born in Okazaki in Aichi Prefecture and remained in the employ of Tokugawa Ieyasu. Hattori Hanzo and his band of ninja are famous for having guided Ieyasu from near Osaka at the time of Nobunaga's assassination across the Iga region to the safety of Okazaki in 1582. He's also known for having attacked and rescued Ieyasu's family from the enemy-held Kaminogo Castle in Aichi's Gamagori city. He was a man of action and intrigue. In fact, Hanzomon, the great gate at Edo Castle, was named after Hattori Hanzo. There are many, many more samurai from the Aichi area who made a great impact on the history of Japan, but for now, these are just a few of the names you may have come across. Their birthplaces, their castles, their battlefields, their footsteps can still be followed through Aichi even today. Okay, let's have a look next at some of the more politically and historically important battles that can be seen as turning points in Japanese history. Battles that took place in Aichi Prefecture. The 1560 Battle of Ikihazama was one such battle, where local warlord Oda Nobunaga, with around just 2,500 men, defeated an invading force of some 25,000 Imagawa clan samurai. That's a ratio of around about 10 to 1. The battle saw General Imagawa Yoshimoto cut down. It saw Oda Nobunaga victorious and his reputation greatly enhanced. It also saw the freedom of a young Tokugawa Ieyasu, who, until then, had been a hostage of the Imagawa. Ieyasu was finally free to return to his lands at Mikawa, and he would later form an alliance with Nobunaga. The battlefields of Ikihazama are found in the southern suburbs of Nagoya City. Parts of the battlefield are now apart, with statues of Nobunaga and Imagawa Yoshimoto. Battle-related sites, such as the head burial mound, command post sites, related temples and routes, can also be visited. 15 years after Ikihazama, the 1575 Battle of Nagashino occurred. It was one of the earliest great gun battles that took place between the joint forces of Oda Nobunaga and Tokugawa Ieyasu against the dreaded Takeda army under Takeda Katsuyori. It was a Waterloo for the Takeda clan. First, the Takeda attempted to enter the Tokugawa-held Mikawa territories. To protect their hindquarters and supply routes, they laid siege to Nagashino Castle, protected by only 500 men. The Oda and the Tokugawa sent reinforcements and made a 2-kilometer-long palisade of logs along the western side of the narrow valley, with the Takeda on the eastern side. When the Takeda made their attack, they had to cross the wet, muddy rice paddies, ford a small river, then cross more muddy rice fields to get to the Oda and Tokugawa troops behind the log fences. As they approached, the Oda and Tokugawa forces unleashed their firearms. Over 3,000 guns were used. The story goes that Nobunaga had developed a reloading and firing system for the single-shot matchlock guns, whereby his army could keep up a continuous volley of shots at the Takeda. It worked, and the Takeda army was basically destroyed. The Nagashino Shibatakatsure battlefields are probably among the best preserved of the many samurai battlefields. A large stretch of the palisades has been recreated, adding to the atmosphere. The nearby museum has a large collection of matchlock guns, arms and armour, and various relics on display. And every May, June and August, battle recreation events take place with armour-clad samurai firing off real matchlock guns. A fantastic experience. The next major battle to take place within Aichi Prefecture was Kamaki Nagagate in 1584, 2 years after the death of Oda Nobunaga. Toyotomi Hideyoshi had by now basically usurped Oda power, and Nobunaga's son was not happy. He called on Tokugawa Ieyasu to help stop Hideyoshi. The two armies came together at Komaki, just north of modern-day Nagoya City, with the Oda and Tokugawa joint forces making their base on Mount Komaki, where Nobunaga had built a now abandoned castle some years before. Surrounding them to the north were Hideyoshi's troops. Both sides sat looking at each other for some time. After a while, it was suggested by one of Hideyoshi's generals that as the Tokugawa troops were here at Komaki, there would be very few at Ieyasu's vital home castle, Okazaki Castle. And so, by attacking and taking the undermanned Okazaki, Ieyasu would have nowhere to go. He would be defeated. And so, a large Toyotomi army made an attempt to get behind the Tokugawa army and to make a strike at Okazaki. The plan was somehow discovered, and Ieyasu soon gave chase to those wanting to attack Okazaki. Catching up to them at Nagagate, east of Nagoya City, a fierce battle took place. Now, although the loss of life was greater on the Toyotomi side, the battle is referred to as a stalemate. Both sides quietly pulled out, ending hostilities. The Kamaki Nagagate battlefields in the ruins of many of the castles associated with this battle can still be visited. At Nagagate, site of the most violent of battles, there are samurai graves, and the small museum on the actual killing fields is an ideal place to start a tour of the area. Maps showing related historical sites are available there too. At the very least, add Iwasaki Castle and its small museum to your list of must-see places too. After Kamaki Nagagate, Hideyoshi would go on to unite the nation and bring peace to Japan. However, when he died in 1598, leaving a 5-year-old son as heir to his empire, a power vacuum was formed. The nation was then split in two as Tokugawa Ieyasu made a grasp for supremacy, and the Toyotomi loyalist Ishida Mitsunari rose to challenge him. Now, this led to the largest, most decisive of samurai field battles, the Battle of Sekigahara, fought in 1600 and just 50 kilometers northwest of Nagoya City. Over 160,000 samurai converged on the narrow plains of Sekigahara and commenced fighting. After 6 hours of battle, much of it close hand-to-hand combat, Tokugawa Ieyasu claimed victory. He was made shogun 3 years later, and he set up his government in Edo, modern-day Tokyo, from where his family would rule for the next 260 years of relative peace. The Sekigahara battlefields are also a must-see site. There's plenty of English signage, maps, routes, and so on. The new Gifu Sekigahara Memorial Museum opened recently, and it really is impressive. Of course, these battlefields and many others in Aichi Prefecture and the surrounding areas can still be visited today. So you can see now that this region really was central to the Sengoku or Warring States period, and that many of the most successful samurai of this formulative period were from the Aichi area. By the late Sengoku period, we find Aichi and central Japan-born warlords holding important positions and strategically key lands across Japan. In the early Edo period, we find around 70% of the nation's daimyo being from central Japan and Aichi Prefecture. Obviously, this made a great impact on the culture of the times. For example, Nagoya-born Toyotomi Hideyoshi took over the Osaka area, and he turned that small village into a sprawling metropolis. When Hideyoshi went to Osaka, he took the people of Aichi, the craftsmen, the cooks, the tastes, the styles and fashions, and with them he created Osaka. Tokugawa Ieyasu was given the mid-north Kanto region in 1590. Edo, modern-day Tokyo, was a small castle town at the time. But as with Hideyoshi shifting to Osaka, Ieyasu too took his own men, his people from Aichi and the surrounding areas, and they took with them their culture, their tastes, styles and so on to help build Edo. In fact, during the early Edo period, the standard spoken Japanese dialect was that of the Mika and Owari, modern Aichi Prefecture accents. We see the same with Kato Kiyomasa taking over Kumamoto, the Kyushu area, the Maida clan when building Kanazawa Castle, Kato Yoshiaki shifting to Shikoku, the Horyo clan being awarded Matsue, Fukushima Masanoori taking over Hiroshima, and so on. The samurai and the people of Aichi went out across Japan, taking with them their own culture and spread it across the land. And so it's my belief that Japan's rich culture and heritage basically evolved from the Aichi region. In the peace times of the Edo period, 1603 to 1868 under Tokugawa rule, this culture was refined and developed. And so we can see that the strong, brave and loyal samurai of this Aichi region were instrumental in forging a strong, successful Japan. One of the strongest symbols of the samurai is without doubt their castles. Now, some of the finest castles across the years were built and refined in Aichi. Because it was at the heart of the Sengoku period, there are literally thousands of castles and castle sites across Aichi Prefecture and the central Japan area. Let's now have a look at just some of the important castle sites here. Nagoya Castle was built by Tokugawa Ieyasu from 1610. It was built to protect eastern Japan from Toyotomi-held western attack. Ieyasu had won the Battle of Sekigahara in 1600 and had become shogun, yet he still didn't have 100% control of the nation. Not while the Toyotomi clan and their many loyal supporters remained. Ieyasu knew that while the Toyotomi retained influence, there was still the potential for civil war. For this reason, he built one of the strongest, finest castles in Japanese history. Nagoya Castle was built using a system known as Tenkabushin. Basically, Ieyasu called on 20 former Toyotomi allied daimyo and allocated them particular sections of his new castle to construct. These daimyo could not refuse an order from Ieyasu, and so they readily complied. By doing this, Ieyasu kept his potential enemies close and under his watch. He kept them busy working on his castle rather than their own plans. And what's more, he kept them impoverished. All work on Ieyasu's Nagoya Castle was at the expense of these daimyo. They had to pay for materials and sourcing, for the labor, transportation costs, etc. They had to pay it all themselves. That kept them too poor to be able to afford weapons, extra samurai, or to wage insurrection. It kept the peace. The result was one of the finest fortresses ever, with the biggest keep of all samurai castles. The grand design was very simple, but very, very effective. So effective that all who worked on her realized that attacking Nagoya was futile. It couldn't be brought down, and so no one ever dared. The 1614 winter and 1615 summer sieges of Osaka, in which the last remnants of the Toyotomi clan were destroyed, were both launched from Nagoya Castle. It was the first castle to have been designated a national treasure in 1930. but unfortunately was mostly destroyed by World War II aerial bombing in 1945, later to be reconstructed. The Honmaru Goten, the main palace, was considered among the greatest in all of Japan and a masterpiece in samurai architecture and art. That palace is a must-see. The front section is Sengoku Warring States period architecture. The rear section is early Edo period. The magnificence, the art, the beauty is a must-see. Another must-see, Uyama Castle, is one of just 12 keeps across Japan remaining in original condition, and one of just 5 designated as a national treasure. Now, of these National Treasure Castle keeps, Uyama Castle is the oldest remaining. The keep was built in the early mid-1500s, although the castle itself was constructed around 1440. Interestingly, it's one of the very few castles to have the Lord's audience chambers within the keep. Most were located within the palaces and mansions below the keep. Uyama Castle was built on a wedge-shaped hill surrounded by the mighty Kisa River, making a natural moat. And from the top of the keep, you can see the entire wide, flat Nobi plains. It really was the perfect position for a castle. Historically, Uyama was Toyotomi Hideyoshi's base when fighting the Battle of Kamaki Nagagate against Tokugawa Ieyasu. Hideyoshi and some 120,000 samurai entered the castle just north of Ieyasu's base at Komaki, and from there commenced the attack. In 1600, Uyama was threatened during the Great Battle of Sekigahara. Until the night before Sekigahara, the 27-year-old daimyo Takanaka Shigekado had been a member of the Western Loyalists and was holding out in Uyama Castle. His gut feeling was that the West would lose at Sekigahara, and so he defected to the east with his remaining 100 samurai. Following Takanaka's lead, Ishikawa Sadakiyo, lord of Uyama, secretly made a deal with the eastern forces not to participate, in effect protecting the hindquarters of the eastern advance and in turn the future of the castle itself. Just the atmosphere of Uyama Castle, walking the floorboards where Nobunaga, Hideyoshi, and a host of famous warriors walked, is a wonderful experience. Just south of Uyama and north of sprawling Nagoya City is Komakiyama, site of the very first castle ever built by Oda Nobunaga in around about 1563. Komakiyama was an innovative castle, the first to use extensive piled stone wall techniques, the first to have a proper jokomachi or castle town area laid out below it, the first to have the Lord's men, Nobunaga's most valued retainers, all living within the same complex, close at hand and ready to take immediate action should they ever face attack. Nobunaga's innovative designs then influenced the very way castles were constructed all around Japan. Komaki's layout, its history and influence on castle construction is fascinating. The 21 hectares of tree-covered mountain is preserved as a national historical site. And don't be surprised to see archaeological research being undertaken when you go to Komakiyama Castle. It really is a current focal point. Take a look at the majority of historically significant samurai battles that took place in the violent Sengoku or Warring States period, and you'll find one interesting connection. Many were launched from Kiyomasu Castle. Indeed, the major battles of Ikihazama, Naga, Nagashino, and even Sekigahara were initially launched from Kiyomasu. Kiyomasu Castle was a major strategic defense, and later the seat of power for the Owari region. When Oda Nobuhide died in 1551, his brother, Oda Nobutomo, seized power, ousting his nephew and rightful heir, Nobunaga. Nobunaga enlisted the help of another uncle, Nobumitsu, and together they attacked and killed Nobutomo at Kiyomasu Castle. 2 years later, Nobunaga's younger brother, Nobuyuki, conspired against him. Nobunaga faked an illness to draw his brother close and assassinated him within Kiyomasu. This eliminated any opposition and ensured clan stability. In 1612, once Tokugawa Ieyasu's splendid Nagoya Castle was mostly completed, many smaller castles were demolished in favour of the new Nagoya Castle, and much of the stonework from the walls, as well as the timber from the various structures, was utilised. Kiyomasu Castle's main keep was dismantled and reconstructed as a turret on the northwestern corner of Nagoya Castle, where it remains to this day. Kiyomasu Castle was reconstructed in concrete as a museum in 1989 across the small river from where the actual castle stood. The site of the keep now has a small tea room and a meeting place on it, and below that is the armour workshop, where you can rent samurai armour to wear while exploring the castle. Shockingly, the JR train lines and the bullet train lines run directly through the middle of the old castle site. The southern half of Kiyomasu Castle is now a park, featuring a rather handsome statue of Oda Nobunaga in full armour. Okazaki Castle is the birthplace of Tokugawa Ieyasu and a key castle of the Tokugawa clan. Tokugawa Ieyasu's grandfather, Matsudaira Kiyoyasu, captured the fortress and rebuilt Okazaki Castle on its present site around about 1531, taking advantage of the Otakuichi River as a natural moat flowing below it. Over the years, the castle was expanded and defensive elements developed and strengthened, allowing it to become one of the nation's most respected castles. In fact, during the Edo period, land-wise, it was the nation's fourth largest castle. Okazaki's keep is now a museum, and another fine attraction well worth visiting is the Ieyasu and Mikawa Bushi, or Warrior Museum, within the grounds of Okazaki Castle. Built in 1505, Yoshida Castle was a small but vitally important fortress involved in a number of Civil War period battles and sieges. One of the major sieges was staged prior to the Battle of Nagashino. The Takeda clan, their forces of over 15,000, laid siege to the small but strategically vital Yoshida Castle, defended by just 500 samurai. Now, Takeda Katsuyori, ever impatient and infuriated at not being able to take the castle easily, decided to attack another nearby castle instead, that of Nagashino. Yoshida Castle was entrusted to a number of daimyo, including Ikeda Terumasa, who went on to build the now national treasure and World Heritage listed Himeji Castle. From 1600, the castle continued to remain a major stronghold once the Tokugawa had taken control of the nation, and an important guardian over the ever-important thoroughfare, the Tokaido. Nagashino, we've already covered just a few minutes ago. The Nagashino Castle ruins are a fascinating place to see. Look at the castle's positioning on the delta of a fork in two rivers atop high cliffs. It was very well designed and developed, and what a great story it has behind it too. Okay, next, Asuke Castle was among the first of the medieval period castles to be properly researched and reconstructed. Never heard of it? Not surprising. It is a very, very small castle. Despite its small size, Asuke has seen a lot of action. Asuke Castle was first established in the 15th century by the Suzuki clan. In 1525, Tokugawa Ieyasu's grandfather attacked Asuke, and in taking it also absorbed the Suzuki samurai too. 29 years later, the Suzuki clan suddenly abandoned their alliance and changed to the rival Imagawa clan. 2 years later, in 1564, Tokugawa Ieyasu, with 3,000 samurai, attacked Asuke, winning it back. The castle was next attacked and taken by Takeda Shingen with 25,000 samurai in 1571. Then, in 1575, Okazaki Nobuyasu, Ieyasu's son, attacked and defeated the Takeda forces at Asuke, once again returning the fortress to the Tokugawa clan. Now, obviously, having been attacked time and again, you can see that Asuke Castle was an important castle strategically. There are very few Sengoku period Yamajiro mountain castles that have been properly reconstructed. This is one of the few. This is where you can really feel the history come alive. Some other samurai-related places you really must visit include the 1,900-year-old Atsuta Shrine, Japan's second most venerated shrine in the south of Nagoya City. This is where Nobunaga prayed for victory while heading to Ikihazama, and Ieyasu too prayed for victory en route to the Battle of Sekigahara. In fact, one of the things to look out for is the Nobunaga Wall, remnants of a protective wall that once surrounded the inner sanctum of Atsuta Shrine. This mud and tile-formed wall was built by Nobunaga in thanks for his victory at Okihazama. The famed Tokugawa Art Museum contains the treasures of the Owari Tokugawa clan and the world's largest collection of daimyo items, ranging from armor and weapons, including swords, guns, spears, to daily life items, including kimono, tea bowls, cutlery, makeup sets, along with books, maps, screens, scrolls. Everything is of the highest quality, befitting the Tokugawa lords of Nagoya. It really is a stunning collection with an ever-rotating series of fascinating displays. And there's the Hideyoshi and Kiyomasa Memorial Museum, a small but informative museum dedicated to the local heroes Toyotomi Hideyoshi and Kato Kiyomasa. It's just to the side of Nakamura Park, birthsite of these two heroes. That's one of the great things about Aichi Prefecture. Wherever you go, you're close to the samurai history and the culture of Japan. A castle site, a battle site, birthsite of a famous warrior, a cultural site. It's all around you, and it's accessible, and it's real. Kyoto was the imperial city, home of the aristocracy. Osaka, although it had a large castle, was basically a merchant city. Same too with Edo, Tokyo. Although a massive city, even in early modern times, it was a city of townsfolk. Nagoya was, from the start, a castle town, a city of samurai, and Aichi Prefecture was at the heart of the Warring States period, birthplace of the finest samurai warriors and the three great unifiers. Well, I hope you found something of interest in this presentation. Thank you for watching. I'm Chris Glenn. Hope to see you sometime soon in the Samurai Heartland, Aichi Prefecture and Samurai City, Nagoya. See you again soon.